Let's talk about peaks. In today's digital world, everything is determined by this ceiling, this 0 dB we can reach. And so what's happening if a signal goes above that? We'll see this in detail. First thing first, hello my dear music producers and fellow sound engineers. I hope you are doing fine. And today we're going to try to untangle the truth that is lying behind these peaks. What is an average peak? What is intersample peak or true peak? What is happening in most of DACs, the digital audio converters of your phones, of your sound cards, of your laptops, of your car system. So in all those parts there are DACs, and how do they handle the peaks? We're going to talk also about MP3. So what is happening once you convert an audio file in a format that is destructing it and that is removing part of the information. Don't take my word for it. I'm going to challenge myself. We're going to see things by doing proper examples, comparison, tryouts. So it's not taking a rule from someone for granted. We're going to try to seek for the truth here. So bear with me, and I hope this will be helpful for you as well as it will be for myself. So first thing is, why don't you want to have overs? Why can't you go above this 0 decibel? The digital format has no values to express the sample point, and so what is happening is that you will have a clipped audio signal. You will get from sine to a square wave, and so you will induce a lot of odd harmonics, creating a very harsh sound. Well, this is partly true and partly not right. Why? Because what's happening is that you can have the sample peak, but you can have the intersample peak, which we call the true peak. The intersample peak is happening when the audio file is regenerated, and by interpolation the signal is recreated, right? Like in this case, for example, if we would look at this waveform, these are different points that are representing the different samples, and we could see that actually this value is getting above the line. We are here a line at -6, but whatever, it could be at 0, and this would be the peak. I could reduce the value of the samples, but because of the interpolation, this is all affecting the overall result, right? So you could have a lot of samples that are below the peak level, but having intersample peaks. Well, the thing is that in 95% of most of the DACs, you can go up to 3 + 3 decibel true peak without harshness, without artifacts. I looked it up. Most of the DACs that we found in today's market are Cirrus Logic CS43131 or CS43198, and they are found into iPhones, MacBooks, and iPads, and some high-end smartphones. And this goes up to +3 dB true peak as headroom. ESS Sabre ES9218P or 9218 Pro, ES9018K2M, and these are found into flagships, smartphones, premium audio players, and USB-C adapters. And these peak up to +6 decibel true peak. You have the Wolfson Microelectronics WM8962 that goes up to +3, +2, +3. Texas Instrument PCM5102A or PCM1792A, and these are found into most of the car audio systems, portable media players, etc., and those goes up to +3, +4 decibel true peak as headroom. Realtek ALC 5686 goes up to +2 decibel true peak. AKM AK4376A or 4452 in most of the smartphones, portable audio players, and professional audio gear as well. Those peak up to +3, +4. Qualcomm WCD9341 are found into Android smartphones with Qualcomm chipsets, and those go up to +2, +3 decibel true peak. And lastly, we have Apple custom DACs that go up to +2 or +3 decibel true peak that are found into Lightning adapters and specific Apple implementations. So if you look at these DACs, we have covered like 95% of the DACs on the market. There are some niche, there are some professional audio or audiophile applications that have even more headroom. There might be some shittier DACs to be found really on low level entry products, but it is safe to say that if you look at 95% of the DACs on the market, and that all of those allow up to at least +2 decibel and even +3 or +4, but at least +2 decibel true peak without audible distortion, that actually your master are allowed to peak at more than 0 decibel true peak. So if you have intersample peaks that are above that, it is fine for the DAC. You will not add harmonic distortion, right? And this might be part of the reason why many big mastering engineers for top tier artists allow their masters to go up to plus 1.5 decibel true peak, because they gain this 1.5 decibel of extra loudness compared to the competitors. This being said, we are talking about peaks here. It's just a tiny peak. It's not the whole signal that is all the time above that. It's for very short periods of time. So you can have intersample peaks that are up to plus 1.5 decibel true peak. This is something totally safe for most of the DACs on the market. Okay, some words about the process, the methodology that I use. So I took an audio file that has been mastered and that was exported at minus 1 decibel true peak. In fact, it's even a little bit below, it's minus 1.03. I loaded this track again in my DAW in Ableton and exported this again 24 bits without any detour. The idea was that I wanted to make an exact copy of that file from within a session where there is no processing happening at all, just controlling the changes in level. Okay, so exported this with my fader at 0, so exact copy minus 1 decibel, minus 1.03 decibel true peak. Then I raised the fader of that channel by 1 decibel, exported this again and got the file at minus 0 decibel true peak, or in fact, as you will see, at minus 0.03. Then I exported this again at plus 1, at plus 1.5, and at plus 2. So these are all the audio files that I loaded into Ableton session, minus 1, 0, plus 1, 1.5, and 2. So first thing that I did is, do I get proper copies between the files? If so, because those have no difference at all, they should null. Let's check if I sum them with a phase flip on one of the two. Here we get total silence. So of course what I did here is I reduced 1 decibel, so they are all level matched to the minus 1 decibel true peak of this first one. Okay, between minus 1 and 0 played 1 decibel quieter, there is no difference at all. We have a total silence, right? Now let's listen how it compares to the little clipped signal. Here we don't have silence, we have dirt, we have something happening here. It's not that quiet actually, and we'll see the level will increase, minus 17 and minus 15. So the more I'm clipping a signal, the more differences I'm creating. This makes sense because clipping is squarifying, as we said already, so it's creating harmonics and removing the lows. And in fact, if we look at the spectrogram and we listen, what do we see, what do we hear? That here we have low end, more of it, and more of it. Minus 24 compared to minus 33. So the more we increase the clipping, this is totally a normal side effect of clipping, the more we increase the clipping, the more artifacts we are generating, and so we are actually making the sound more dirty. And so this has nothing to do with the way converters can handle the overs, because some converters can handle sound going above the 0 decibel true peak. That's not the problem of the converter, it's inherently the way the clipping is affecting the waveform in a digital format. And if you look at the waveforms, if I were to zoom in a lot, actually we could see the differences here. The clipping above 0 decibel true peak does have an effect on sound, and the effect is added harmonics and reduced amount of low-end content. And if I were, instead of summing them, to play them back to back, let's start at the 0 decibel true peak, plus 1, plus 1. 5 and +2. At this point, the audible differences might be hard to grasp on YouTube, so I will send you a separate audio pack, link in the description, where you can listen to the audio files by yourself and replicating. I will send the whole Ableton session, but you can go into the folders and find the audio files if you don't have Ableton to try it out in any other DAW. So my first conclusion here is that, in fact, we see that this clipping is creating artifacts on the signals that get above, so it's altering more the transients, it's altering the high level elements. And the way it does it, using a clipper inside a session as well, the side effect is that the louder the signal, the longer the peaks are going to be, the longer the clips are going to be. So instead of just clipping tiny little bits of sound very short, the more you clip, the longer the clipped signals, the clipped samples will be. The more samples you'll have that will be following each other that are clipped. So it increases the level of the clips, but it also affects the length of them, and so the perceptive clarity on the transients. For me, this is the main part, and because you hear more clipping on low end, the more low end your track has, the more you hear this. And this might be already some part of the answer on when or why you should or you shouldn't clip. I think for music that is heavily loaded in low end, music that has long sustained bass lines, clipping is altering the signal a lot more. The more pure tones you have, the more clarity you have in the original material, the more you will hear the artifacts of those odd harmonics clipping is inducing. So to take two big different examples, if I were to clip a sine wave playing at 35 Hertz, I would hear this a lot. While if I was to clip a pop metal track with a lot of hits and with a lot of distortion in there, the artifacts of the clipping will be more buried inside the mix itself because the track is denser. So for me, this rule is really made of those two elements. How much low end do I have and how sustained is this low end? That's one aspect. And how pure is that low end and how pure is the track in general, or how denser, how is it harmonic wise? If I have high harmonic density and that I have very snappy elements, I could get away with this clipping, with the clipping artifacts. But in my case, working on a lot of electronic music, techno, deep techno, where we have really like big subs, and those subs are pretty pure tones, where the 808 kick is doing doo, and it's like just a sine wave at 30 Hertz, these clipping artifacts are not acceptable. And so looking back at why do some big names in pop music end up being clipped, well, because in pop music you have not that strong low-end content as you have, for example, in dubstep, drum and bass, or deep techno music. And often those tracks are more saturated, are more dense harmonically than some of maybe ambient music playing just with sine waves and things like that. Now the question is there a difference between -1 decibel true peak and 0 decibel true peak? And where does this difference lay? It's not into the WAV file, this we sorted out. So the question is what's happening when we convert audio files to MP3. Some encoders are better than others. Some encoders offer, even with the same encoding, different algorithms of that encoding, different qualities of that encoding. You also have CRC, which is a checksum quality check. It's the encoder verifying that that every frame has been not corrupted. So it's a corruption analysis. So between the CRC corruption checksum and the differences in quality inside one algorithms, we'll see that there will already be some audible differences in the MP3 result. And now we're going to check in how is the peak level impacting those results. So this is the second part of this protocol. What I did is I started by taking then the 0 decibel true peak as a reference from the WAV file. And from that one, I bounced 3 versions in MP3 using either high quality and CRC, using the switch converter, in switch converter, I can choose if I have CRC and if I have a higher quality codec, bouncing in 320 kilobits, so highest quality possible. HQ plus CRC, just CRC and nothing. And I did this for 0 decibel true peak, and I did this for -1 decibel true peak conversion, and I loaded this again. And then I did some delta between those and listening to the original file. For this, I will send you the file. I will not play them here because it makes no sense. I think the YouTube conversion is going to be on top of that. So let's forget about trying to translate that audibly in YouTube. But I will just read out my conclusions. So first things first. Is MP3 in general affected by a difference in loudness between -1 and 0 decibel? Well, yes. MP3 induces a kind of blurriness, especially in the low end, but also a kind of drive distortion slightly. And this effect is stronger going from -1 decibel true peak to 0 decibel true peak. So this might be a good reason to keep exporting at -1. But the rumble and the drive that I was hearing, I think could be an acceptable output and make it worse to check the MP3 compatibility while changing the true peak level, because those artifacts can somehow play along with the music. In some cases, because I did this for this track, but I did it for a lot of other tracks, I did the same protocol and I listened. Some I was losing too much of the transient and I was blurring the low end. And in some of them, it was actually even working as a kind of glue. You know, like you would put some saturator on the lower band to beef things up and to blend things together. Well, actually, there it worked a bit like that. So, yes, the difference between -1 and 0 decibel true peak is audible, but it's not always per se a bad thing. So my conclusion here is, if you want to be as much as transparent, if you want really to be as clean as the original file, then you should go for the -1 decibel true peak. But if you are willing to agree in some blurriness and some dirt being added, and that this dirt is playing with the music, then you might choose to go up to 0 decibel true peak. And so if you really want to go in depth into this rabbit hole, you can just put ozone, isotope ozone on the master bus, where they have this instant converter that is letting you hear how the sound will translate when converting to MP3, and play with the input gain and see where the sound is falling apart, whether you like it or where you don't like it. So that's the first thing. So sound does change, but it might be something that is likable. Then I tried the difference in the impact of this -1 to 0, checking the differences in the algorithms, in the high quality or in the quality check. My impression of that and my conclusion was that the impact of the peak is that the high quality mode, the high quality conversion, I'm not talking about the bitrate, I'm really talking about the mode the converter is reacting. As a reminder, I'm talking about this here. I'm talking about what is here happening. High quality mode preserves better the basis, the low end. It is somehow closer to the original. It has somehow a bit more depth and a bit more punch. When the peaks were at 0, I felt that the punch was a bit more behind and the depth of the low was a bit behind. It was a bit more hollow. Peaking at -1 gave the track a fuller low end. It had a fuller body. So this is another reason why actually whatever the settings you are using, exporting at -1 in high quality will give you, of course, better quality, but a better restitution of the lows. And being at -1 dB instead of 0 decibel true peak will give you a fuller low end. So the more you push the sound close to the 0, the more you lose that low end punch and that low end depth. Another interesting thing to check is the impact of MP3 conversion to peaks. Because of the coding and of the cosine function being used while coding MP3, because of the fact that it is removing some part of the information. But imagine you have a few frequencies that are stacked on top of each other, 100, 200, 300, 400. So they are in a harmonic progression. But the lower one in your existing audio file is kind of phase flipped from the other ones. It means that it won't pile up that much. If you remove that, then out of a sudden, the starting of the phase of all those harmonics are getting together. And so you can actually, by removing some content, you can increase some peaks. In some way also, it's also altering a little the phase. And as we saw in a previous video, if I'm filtering a sound that has been clipped, I'm recreating peaks because of the phase shift. So because of the way the algorithm works, by choosing psychoacoustically some elements, because of the way it is removing some energy sometimes and also flipping the phase, converting to MP3 can recreate peaks above the maximum peak level of the original file. And if you look at this, we see it here. 0 decibel true peak has been converted to MP3, and I have here peaks at plus 0.9, 0.19, 0.2. And so I did a little table where I checked this all. Here are my notes. So what you can see is from 0 decibel true peak, the non-quality check and non-CRC, I have plus 0.19 and plus 0.21 on the left and the right channel. CRC is the same. High quality plus CRC, I have plus 0.26 and 0.2. So it's a little bit more difference in peaks with the high quality. Why, I don't know, but this is happening. From the 1 decibel true peak, I get to minus 0.1, so the difference is also 0.2. We are in the same ballpark as differences as from the 0 decibel true peak. CRC on is the same, and in high quality mode, I have a difference of 0.2126, which is broadly the same as with the 0 decibel true peak value. So being close to 0 decibel or to minus 1 decibel doesn't change the impact of the peaks, but the conversion in general is changing the loudness of the peaks. What should we do with all this? My conclusion here so far is the impact of peaks on converters is irrelevant. The impact on overs and on clipping on the audio file itself is relevant, whether you have pure tones or low-end sustained content. In that case, 0 decibel is the upper limit that is acceptable for non-compressed formats, for WAV or AFF. As soon as you get to compress to MP3, there is an impact on that true peak loudness, and minus 1 decibel true peak will always sound better and closer to the original file than the 0 decibel true peak version. So if you are lazy and you just want the highest fidelity, go for minus 1 decibel true peak in your exports and then convert them to MP3 using a high quality encoder. If you want to play with the encoder, then inside your session you can start to play around with the minus 1 to 0 decibel and listen how the encoder is reacting to that, and choose if this blurriness, if this dirtiness that is added to the low end is something that you feel pleasant, that you can live with, and if it's worth that extra decibel in gain. This is also a matter of choice, right? Now, this being said, I didn't speak at all about the algorithms behind those clippers and limiters that are allowing to keep that true peak level. Do I use a true peak limiter? Do I oversample? How is oversampling reacting? Is it oversampling the sidechain signal? Is it oversampling the original signal? Do we have anti-aliasing filters? Is there a second stage of clipping or limiting happening after the upsampled version? Because some clippers or limiters are working like that as well. These are all other aspects that will influence the sound that I'm not covering today because it is already a very long video. My whole purpose here was just to look scientifically at the values of the digital files without any processing happening and how the converters in the MP3 conversion is affected by those values. I hope it was helpful. I hope you like this content and it will open your eyes